Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maurya Hanspal, and in this session, we can continue our session on fixed income instruments. Before starting a discussion, just a second. Give me a second. Yeah, some connectivity issue maybe from my side. Okay. So in the previous session, we were talking about the fixed income instruments, and we started our discussion on understanding why to have a complete equity portfolio, why not to have a complete equity portfolio, why to have a complete bond portfolio, why not to have a complete bond portfolio, and the best alternative having a combination of both of these. Okay, so here we'll try to and also I told you the concept of the inverse relationship between the price of the bond and the yield of the bond. When the price rises, the yield of the bond falls. When the price falls, the yield of the bond rises. This thing we talked about. Okay. So let me tell you one of the major concepts of the bond and a practical scenario, and that will also summarize the one of the reasons why only the long-term investors or the people who know the tips and tricks of stock market and the tips of earning wealth accumulate more money for a longer time period. Okay, so this is the first scenario. We can see like 90% of the people lose their money in the stock market as suggested in like one of the top studies. Okay, but that 90% by losing money, it does not mean that they are like losing their wealth. It can happen that their wealth is still intact. Out of that wealth, they might have lost some money. Okay, so ideally like 60-70% people do not make money in the stock market, and 30-20% people like make their money in the stock market. And those 30-20% people, like when we talk about Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala having a net worth of more than 645 crores, Vijay area, right? So like all these people, your Ramdev Agarwal, all these people who are at a good position and having a huge wealth in their portfolio. Okay, because these people believe in long-term investing. These people are not affected by the volatility of the market. Like sometime if the market is correcting, like because of the rise in bond yields or the Russia-Ukraine crisis or COVID, they still invest at least 95% of their income is 95% of their investment remains still intact into the market, and they do not get driven by such volatile. And we as the retail investors, and what is the meaning of the retail investor? These are basically those investors who invest in the market up to 2 lakh rupees and not more than that. And high net worth individual investors, HNIs, are those persons that invest more than 2 lakh rupees, and ultra high net worth individuals are those that are like investing more than crores into the market. So these people agreed presently, be it your Mr. Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, Mr. Vijay Kedia, the ultra high net worth individual investors. But when they started their journey, they were the retail investors only. So from these retail investors, they have become ultra high net worth individuals by managing their own portfolio. Khud se. Okay, so that is one thing. So let's take a classic example of the bond market. Like for example, if the price of the bond in the market is 100 rupees, and this is the face value, as I told you in one of the previous sessions also, in equity, the dividend is paid always on the face value and not the current market price of the share. Similarly, when you are getting interest on your bond, the interest is paid always on the face value of the bond and not the market price of the bond, and that you need to understand. As in case of dividend also, the dividend is being paid on the face value and not the current market price. Similarly, in case of bonds also, the interest payment is being paid on the face value and not the current market price of the bond. Face value is nothing the par value or the main value, the initial value at which the bond was issued. Okay, understood this much? Now, the company A, and this is the company A, it is promising you a 6% rate of interest on bond. A 6% rate of interest on bond you are getting. It means every year, like you'll be getting 6 rupees on this bond. Okay. And bond is not a kind of a hard security or a hard commodity that would be given to you. It is just in the form of a transfer certificate, as happens in case of shares. Like when you buy the shares, you do not get a hard commodity like in your hand ki aapko shares mil rahe hain. Okay, those shares are the form of the shared certificates that gets electronically transferred. Okay, similarly, in the case of the bonds also, there are the bond certificates on which it is mentioned that the company is issuing bonds worth rupees 100 ki face value, and the company wants to raise 5,000 crores of money and promise to pay the 6% interest to its investors. That all the details are mentioned in the form of a piece of paper or a digital contract. Okay. So again, at the end, it stands to be a piece of paper, be it your share certificate or a bond certificate. Clear? So here the company has promised to pay 6% rate of interest. It means every year and it is annually. And again in that contract, it would be further mentioned that the rate of interest is annually or semi-annually. Annually है तो मतलब साल में एक बारी ₹6 मिलेगा on 100 rupees. Now this face value can be 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, anything. Okay. If it is semi-annually, it means this 6% would be divided into two. That is 3%, 3% you will get in first 6 months, and the remaining 3% you will get in the last 6 months. If it's quarterly, it means every 3 months like you will be getting it. Like you have 4 quarters of 3 months. Okay, so like you will be getting every 3 months में आपको मिलता रहेगा अपना पैसा. Like this 6 would be like divided into two. It means like 1.5% like you will be getting 4 times a year. अगर monthly है तो मतलब 6 would be like divided by 12. It means like 0.5% like you will be getting every month. Okay, but ideally, personal experience it has been annually, semi-annually and quarterly max to max. ठीक है, कहीं monthly नहीं मिलता. That is one thing. So coming back to the example, it's giving you 6%. Now what will happen? People will think, and just also assume earlier the rate of interest was like 3% or 4%. And there was an accommodative easing going on in the market. The interest rates were too low. But now the central banks are concerned about inflation and the rate of interest have increased from 3% to 6%. 3% से बढ़ गया. Like you might have heard in the market, they talk about 2 basis point, 1 basis point. When they talk about 1 basis point, it is nothing but 0.01%. 1 basis point is 1/100th of a percent. So 1 by 100 is 0.01%. 2 basis point is 0.02. 60 basis point is 60 by 100. Like recently, RBI is saying that 50 by like 100 से बढ़ा रहे, मतलब 0.5% से they're trying to increase the interest rate. But अभी वो रशिया यूक्रेन के हो रहे हैं क्राइसिस, तो they're saying कि 0.25 से बढ़ा देंगे. Because मतलब कि बाकी situations भी देखनी है. Right? That is the other practical scenario which I told you. Now assume a situation, there was a stance of accommodative easing. The country was focusing more on growth and towards employment. But now the inflation has started, and because of that, the bonds are promising you an increased rate of interest by 3%. पहले 3% था, अब 3% से बढ़ के 6% हो गया. Now assume this is the equity market, somewhere in between equity market. अब यहाँ पे लोगों ने अपना पैसा डाला. अब people will think equity market is very risky. बट यहाँ पे अब रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट भी बढ़ गया, बिकॉज पहले बस 3% था, अब 6% का मिल रहा है. एंड सेफ भी है, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स भी हमारी सेफ रहेंगे. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि इक्विटी मार्केट्स को सारे मतलब कि लोग खाली कर देंगे. जिन लोगों में दिमाग नहीं होगा वो इंटरेस्ट देख के अगर 100 रुपये इक्विटी में करें इन्वेस्ट, वो 100 का 100 निकाल के देख के यहाँ पर डाल देंगे. बट कुछ लोग होंगे 80-90% जो 100 का 40-50 या 60% निकाल के इस मार्केट में डालना शुरू कर देंगे. तो यहाँ पे पैसा फिर आने लगा. तो द बेसिक प्रिंसिपल ऑफ स्टॉक मार्केट, मनी इज कमिंग हियर, डॉलर्स रुपीज जो भी ठीक लगे लगा लेना. When the demand for the stock market is more, or the demand for the shares in the market for more, the share price rises. Like when there is more demand and the market is bullish. Now here the market turns to be bearish. Now the market turns to be bearish. And when the market turns to be bearish, there is more sale or selling start हो जाती है. And when there is more selling, because people are withdrawing their money or redeeming their money from the equity market and taking it to the bond market, it starts to fall. अब ये नहीं मतलब कि क्रैश ही हो गई, जिसे हम करेक्शन बोलते हैं. ओके, अब यहाँ पे पैसा आ गया. सेम रूल गोज विद द बॉन्ड मार्केट. नाउ इफ पीपल आर डिमांडिंग मोर बॉन्ड, वो 100 रुपए का बॉन्ड खरीदे जा रहे हैं, अब डिमांड बढ़ेगी तो ये 100 रुपीज का बॉन्ड विल गो ऑन टू बिकम 150 rupees approximately. Okay, it can become 140, it can become 120, it can become 200 also, just taking for the sake of simplicity of the calculations. Okay, so when we take it for the sake of simplicity of the calculation, so what is really happening, 100 का like 150 हो गया. Okay, but जो rate of interest मिलेगा वो 100 पर ही मिलना है, 6% of 150 नहीं मिलेगा, as told you earlier also. In equity share, the dividend is always paid on face value. Bond market में भी interest payment is always on face value and not the current market value. Okay, so that is one thing you need to understand very carefully. 6% 100 का मिल रहा है और लोग 150 रुपीज का बॉन्ड खरीद रहे हैं. बॉन्ड महंगे पर खरीद रहे हैं बट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट कम पर ही मिल रहा है. क्या बोला मैं? बॉन्ड महंगे पर खरीद रहे हैं बट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट कम पर ही मिल रहा है. नाउ कंपनी बी कम्स, it says I am issuing face value का bond 100 and I'm giving you a rate of interest of 10%. Now people here will feel company B has come. Instead of giving just 6%, they're giving us 10%. People tend to be greedy. They will start withdrawing their investment and the investment will start to shift here. जब तक ये होगा तब तक इक्विटी मार्केट भी बैलेंस्ड आउट हो जाएगी. ठीक है, अब what happens? The demand is rising. Price of 100 rupees will go on to be like 150 rupees. Okay, maybe 200 rupees because the demand is more. But जो rate of interest है वो 100 पर ही मिलेगा, 150 या 200 पे नहीं मिलेगा. अब यहाँ पे क्या हो गया, बॉन्ड की सप्लाई हो गई. यहाँ से हो रही थी सप्लाई, यहाँ पे आ रही है डिमांड 10% की. यहाँ पर भी हो रही थी सप्लाई और यहाँ पे थी डिमांड. अब यहाँ पे सप्लाई हो गई, 100 रुपीज का जो फेस वैल्यू है ना वो 80 का हो जाएगा या 50 का हो जाएगा या 60 का हो जाएगा, कुछ भी हो सकता है. बिकॉज द सप्लाई इज गोइंग ऑन एंड जब सप्लाई होगी तो प्राइस गिर जाएगा. People who are smart will stay here in this bond only and they won't shift to this bond because यहाँ पे वो महंगा खरीद कर उनको कम इंटरेस्ट मिल रहा है. 200 रुपये 250 रुपीज का बॉन्ड खरीद रहे हैं एंड बस 10%, और यहाँ पे 80 रुपीज 50 रुपीज आधे प्राइस में बॉन्ड खरीद रहे हैं बट जो रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट तो 100 पर ही मिल रहा है. एंड दैट इज व्हाट द टॉप इन्वेस्टर्स डू. दे कीप देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इंटैक्ट and they do not get driven by these market conditions. What did I say? They keep their investments intact and they do not get driven by these market conditions. Understood? So that one thing you need to keep in mind. Why the top investors, the big investors, like 20-30% are able to make money in the market. That is the reason for that. Okay. Going back. Yeah. Now let's try to understand the difference between bond and debentures. Okay. Though these terms are used interchangeably, in India we say that the debentures are issued at 6% rate of interest promised to the party who is entitled to bear this instrument and all those stuffs. Bonds are being used in terms of the abroad countries. Okay, but there is of course a difference between the two that you need to know. Debentures are unsecured. Debentures are unsecured, whereas bonds are secured. Debentures are unsecured, but the bonds are secured. And how? See, when we take a loan, like for example, if we have taken a loan for something, okay, we took a home loan, and in the collateral, we put our house for it. It means if we are not able to pay off the EMI, the equated monthly installment जो हम interest pay करेंगे उसमें, that will comprise both your principal amount and interest amount. अगर हम वो pay नहीं कर पा रहे, after a certain period of time, the bank would be liable to take our house to the auction, invite bidding and sell my house. Same goes for car. अगर मैंने कार को रखा है collateral में या किसी भी चीज को मैंने रखा है like collateral में, so that one thing will happen. That's a case of a secured. बट इन केस ऑफ अनसिक्योर्ड, अगर किसी चीज के लिए लोन लिया है बट उसके पीछे कोई एसेट ही नहीं है, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल आई टुक अ पर्सनल लोन and my personal loan was unsecured because I did not put any asset behind it. So those recovery agents cannot come in and sell my house, my car, my TV, my fridge because they're unsecured. So the unsecured ones are called debentures and the secured ones are called bonds. That you need to know. Okay. So basically, what happens in terms of companies, if the companies are issuing their debentures, so either like they will mention secured debentures or unsecured debentures. Ideally, in India, they mention the secured debentures and unsecured debentures. Outside India, they mention debentures for unsecured and bonds for secured. Okay, so basically, what happens if my company wants some money and I'm issuing a debenture? So it means if I'm not able to pay back the interest payment to all those persons who have given me money or purchased my bonds, because ultimately अगर मैं बॉन्ड मार्केट में लाया हूँ, लोगों ने मेरा बॉन्ड खरीदा है, अब उन्होंने बॉन्ड खरीदा है तो अल्टीमेटली दे हैव पेड मी मनी. आई एम द सेलर एंड दे आर द बायर ऑफ द बॉन्ड, सो आई गॉट द मनी, so I will have to pay somewhat interest rate to them. So I has to promise both the principal amount and interest amount. And interest amount क्यों देना पड़ेगा? That you can study from the concept of time value of money that I've talked about in the previous sessions also, because inflation बढ़ती है and वो 100 रुपए आगे जाके जिसने मुझे 100 रुपए दिए हैं उसके लिए वो it can become like 120, 150. So while taking into consideration the inflation rate, एक रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट उनको मुझे देना ही देना पड़ेगा ताकि उनका अमाउंट भी मतलब एक कॉम्पनसेट हो जाए. इसके बारे में ज़्यादा जान, तो सेपरेट लेक्चर्स आर अवेलेबल ऑन टाइम वैल्यू ऑफ मनी. ओके, so if there is no asset, if I'm not able to pay back my money to those investors, my investors are not liable to sell my assets. When bank is not liable to sell my assets, in that case it is unsecured. And unsecured में rate of interest भी मुझको ज़्यादा देना पड़ेगा, 8%, 9%, 12%, 13%, because these are unsecured. Unsecured है तो रिस्क भी ज़्यादा है. Higher the risk, higher is the expected return. अब बॉन्ड्स में क्या होगा, अगर मेरी कंपनी इन्वेस्टर्स को एक फिक्स रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट नहीं दे पाए तो माय एसेट्स आर एट कोलैटरल. दे कैन सेल माय प्लांट, बिल्डिंग, मशीनरी एंड कैन रिकवर द मनी. इन्वेस्टर्स फिजिकली नहीं करेंगे, वो बैंक करेगा एंड बैंक बेच के इन्वेस्टर्स को अपना पैसा दे देगा. सिंस दे आर सिक्योर्ड एंड दे कैरी लेस अमाउंट ऑफ रिस्क, अब कम रिस्क है तो कम रिटर्न भी मिलेगा, 6%, 7% का. अब नाउ यू वुड से व्हाई पीपल गो फॉर डिबेंचर्स एंड नॉट बॉन्ड्स. बॉन्ड्स कंप्लीटली एग्रीड, वो सिक्योर्ड है एंड वहाँ पे कम, बट पीपल आर ग्रीडी एंड दे आर लाइक रेडी टू टेक द रिस्क. अब यहाँ पे मान लो कि कंपनी कर गई, मतलब कि बैंकरप्ट हो गई या फिर कोलैप्स कर गई, ठीक है, एंड दे आर लाइक द इन्वेस्टर विल स्टार्ट ब्लेमिंग टू द कंपनी कि आप हमारे पैसे वापस नहीं कर रहे, आप अपने एसेट्स को बेचो. देन पूरा मतलब वो प्रोसीडिंग्स चलेंगी, वो ट्रिब्यूनल आएगा, बहुत लंबा सीन होगा. आपने इस कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करा ही क्यों जब आपको पता था रिस्की है. बॉन्ड्स में आप क्यों इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हो? सो दैट यू कैन गेट अ फिक्स रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. बट ये नहीं कि bonds are not risky. Bonds are also risky if you are investing in a bankrupt company, a risky company, a distressed company. Because these companies are the bankrupt companies, इनको पैसा चाहिए, इनके पास पैसा नहीं है तो वो ज़्यादा मतलब कि रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट भी देंगे. एंड यहाँ पे अगर वो बॉन्ड्स में ये सिक्योर्ड कंपनीज हैं, अब ये नहीं है मतलब कि like these companies won't default. These companies can also default like due to some unforeseen contingency or something comes up, but the chances are very less. So probability is almost equivalent to negligible, and here the probability is very high. But these companies come into the market and they say completely agreed. आप अगर हमारी कंपनी में पैसा लगा रहे हो, there is risk, but we are giving you more return for that also. And then people get like greedy, their eyes get watered, and they go and buy the bonds, not the bonds like but the debentures of these companies. Okay. So now the second thing also happens, like when we talk about the credit risk, when we talk about the credit risk, the and this is called the credit risk basically. अगर मैं अपनी obligations को fulfill कर पा रहा हूँ या नहीं, अपनी obligations को मैं fulfill कर पा रहा हूँ नहीं. If I have taken a loan from someone, if I have given bonds, bond is like a loan. राइट? अल्टीमेटली मुझे इंटरेस्ट पेमेंट देनी है, उसमें बैंक को देनी होगी, यहाँ पे लोगों को देनी, ठीक है? तो क्रेडिट रिस्क जिसमें ज़्यादा है, अब क्रेडिट रिस्क किसमें ज़्यादा होगा? ऑल दोज डिबेंचर्स एंड ऑल दोज सिक्योरिटीज विच आर रिस्की, जो रिस्की हैं, जो बैंकरप्ट होने का जिनका आसार है, जिनके पास प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी नहीं है, कैश फ्लोज बहुत कम है, दोज पोजेस अ क्रेडिट रिस्क, एंड हायर द क्रेडिट रिस्क, हायर इज द एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न। हाँ, लिख देते हो हाई क्रेडिट रिस्क, बट दीज कंपनीज हैव लो क्रेडिट रिस्क, लो क्रेडिट रिस्क, these companies have low credit risk, that is one thing। अब यहाँ पे क्रेडिट रिस्क जो है वो बहुत ही कम है, बिकॉज रिस्क भी तो कम है, सिक्योर्ड बॉन्ड्स है ना। एंड दीज रेटिंग्स आर गिवन ईदर बाय क्रिजल, you have the agency called CRISIL, Credit Rating Information Service of India Limited, CRA, uh, Investment Credit Rating Agency, Industrial Credit Rating Agency, you have CARE, Credit Analysis and Research। ये मेनली 4 ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है इंडिया में, बाहर और भी हैं, S&P, Fitch, Moody's, all these also give their ratings, but like these are the main ones। okay, like these are giving the rating, यानी अगर टॉप ए है, मान लो कि ट्रिपल ए की रेटिंग दी है, these are the prime bonds। ओके, मतलब जिनके डिफॉल्ट होने के चांस बहुत ही कम है, द प्राइम बॉन्ड्स। ट्रिपल ए बॉन्ड्स में जब तुम आते हो, दोज आर कॉल्ड डबल ए बॉन्ड, दोज आर कॉल्ड द इन्वेस्टमेंट ग्रेड बॉन्ड्स। मैं सब रेज कर देता हूँ, देन आई जस्ट राइट इट। This concept must be like clear to you, higher risk and lower risk। You get triple A ratings, triple A plus, these are the prime bonds, जिनका चांस बहुत ही कम है कि वो डिफॉल्ट करेंगे, प्राइम बॉन्ड्स। डबल ए बॉन्ड्स आर द इन्वेस्टमेंट ग्रेड बॉन्ड्स। ट्रिपल बी तक सब ठीक होता है, लाइक ट्रिपल बी तक या प्लस तक एवरीथिंग इज फाइन। इसके नीचे का लाइक जितने भी बॉन्ड्स आ जाते हैं, कॉल्ड स्पेक्यूलेटिव बॉन्ड्स, इट मींस दे पोजेस अ हायर रिस्क। स्पेक्यूलेटिव बॉन्ड्स, speculative bonds, that is they possess a higher risk, speculative bonds। बी डबल बी, बी बी माइनस, मतलब कि रेटिंग्स लाइक डिफरेंट डिफरेंट होती हैं एजेंसीज की, इकरा किरण, उसमें सब में मतलब कि सिर्फ डबल ए होता है हाईएस्ट, किसी में लाइक ट्रिपल ए हाईएस्ट होती है, जिसमें ट्रिपल ए प्लस हाईएस्ट होता है, और यू कैन गो फॉर बिकॉज द स्पेक्युलेटिव बॉन्ड्स, एंड डी आर द जंक बॉन्ड्स, सबसे खराब। You might have heard about Franklin and Templeton that closed its 6 debt schemes, Franklin Templeton, because उसका मैक्सिमम इन्वेस्टमेंट जंक बॉन्ड्स में था, मैक्सिमम उसका इन्वेस्टमेंट जंक बॉन्ड्स में था, and that was the reason why it was not able to pay back and the schemes were closed। and schemes closed होने का मतलब ये नहीं कि लोगों को अपना पैसा वापस नहीं मिला, पैसा वापस मिलेगा बट धीरे धीरे मिलेगा। लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, इफ यू हैव अ पोर्टफोलियो, यहाँ पे सिक्योरिटीज है, एंड इसमें से लाइक कुछ सिक्योरिटीज टर्न टू बी बैंकरप्ट, तो इसको एक अलग से पोर्टफोलियो में डाल दिया जाएगा, दैट वुड बी अ सेग्रीगेटेड पोर्टफोलियो, सेग्रीगेटेड पोर्टफोलियो। एंड जैसे जैसे मान लो कि रिकवरी से पैसा यहाँ पर आता जाएगा, वो पैसा लाइक सबको मिलता जाएगा, मतलब लाइक इन इन्वेस्टर्स को अपना पैसा मतलब कि वापस मिलता जाएगा। अब ये नहीं मतलब कि यहाँ पे पैसा नहीं है, पैसा मिलेगा उनको भी, बट व्हेन द कंपनी दैट टर्न इनटू बैंकरप्ट विल स्टार्ट पेइंग, एट दैट पॉइंट दे विल गेट मनी। ओके, so that one thing is very important that needs to be understood। So in this session, we try to understand bonds. We try to understand the difference between bonds and debentures। एक और difference है between bonds and debentures में, जैसे कि first difference था कि debentures are unsecured and bonds are secured। Debentures में if the company is winding up or the company is going into bankruptcy and liquidation, the debenture holders will be paid after the bond holders because those are unsecured। तो पहले जिन्होंने बॉन्ड होल्ड करा है उन सबको पैसा मिलेगा, उसके बाद अगर कुछ पैसा बचा then only the debentures will get it, like the people who are holding the debentures, and that you need to understand as well. That is why I suggest, like, if you're getting an opportunity to choose between the debentures and bonds, always choose a bonds, because bonds will give you a secure. Because even if the company is going into winding up and liquidation, your investment is safe. Okay, that you need to understand. Again, we talk about the differences between your bonds and debentures. Okay, this was the thing of the discussion between the bonds and debentures. So that's all for today. I'll